FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio.
Our regular foreign policy expert with the D.C. International Advisory, former advisor to former VP Dick Cheney, Stephen Yates. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hi, Dana. Great to be back.
The Benghazi gate, the more information that comes out about this, the more my jaw drops. This, I think, is a classic example of why you don't throw the intelligence community under the bus. We just keep getting more and more information about this, including how the stand down order. Just to start off right off the top with that, who on earth would give the order to stand down?
Well, it seems as though it would have to be something cleared by the president. I mean, when you're dealing with the life of a presidential appointee overseas, I can't imagine anyone at any lower level being willing to sign off on that, knowing that if anything should go wrong, as it did, it ultimately comes back to the president anyway.
Yeah, well, and you would think, although everyone now, it seems, though, is trying to throw each other under the bus over this latest particular incident, those saying that, well, it was Hillary had asked for more security, Obama said no, and then somehow General Petraeus might be under the bus for it. It's so convoluted, and Petraeus is still, just as of 2 days ago, he was still trying to say that Benghazi was a spontaneous attack. None of them can keep their story straight at this point. And here we have reports that the CIA annex was taking fire just a little bit after the consulate was ransacked. Then we have the reports of the two drones that recorded the attack on Benghazi. What is there ultimately? What can you believe in everything coming out?
Well, I think it's very, very clear now that no one distinguished themselves in this. I don't think that General Petraeus did in his role as director of CIA. Certainly James Clapper made a joke of himself in trying to bring the updates into the president in the form of the presidential daily brief that had verifiably false information in them. Secretary Clinton doesn't come out looking as though she made appropriate command decisions. The gut-wrenching account of that former SEAL's father talking about her raising the video as his body is being brought back into the country, knowing at the time that this had nothing to do with the video. I mean, really all the way around, there's dereliction of duty, really offense to sensibilities. The only thing we know for an absolute fact is that they left our mission there without appropriate security. They made a bet on their ideology and foreign policy that this would work out okay. And they, I think, most importantly, chose, after knowing exactly what they know now, for the most part, to project a false narrative. And it's really what Jay Carney and Susan Rice put forward, that the president and others reinforced, I think, that is the sin in this enterprise.
How much stock do you put into the claim made by Army Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer? He said on Saturday that his sources told him the president was in the room at the White House watching the attack on our consulate in Benghazi happen in real time. What do you make of that?
I have, I think, a built-in deep skepticism of people giving first-hand accounts or second-hand accounts about how things happened inside the White House. Ultimately, this stuff will be verified, but there are really only 2 or 3 possible locations the president would have been: the residence, the Oval Office, and the Situation Room. And if it was in the Situation Room, I really doubt that this is like the bin Laden raid where they all gathered in one room to watch. And so I think that there's a lot of rumor going on in this regard. But I think that inescapable that the president should have been monitoring this information real time. He allegedly had time for a 1-hour political phone call with Prime Minister Netanyahu to try to ease that relationship ahead of the foreign policy debate. But didn't, in that same period of time, seemingly have the opportunity to keep up to date with what was happening in Benghazi, and then went to sleep on it before going to a fundraiser.
Right. And there were also reports that a Predator drone that was conducting, and this came from CBS, that was conducting surveillance mission elsewhere was diverted from its mission and sent to videotape the attack over Benghazi. I'm wondering, is that footage ever going to be released at least to some of the upper management there in Washington, D.C., so that we can, like maybe perhaps the Senate Armed Services Committee or someone, so that they can see what happened? And wouldn't that drone, if that was a Predator drone, wouldn't it be armed?
Well, I know for a fact that everyone inside the system that has sufficient clearances, whether at the Pentagon, the White House, State Department, anyone that supports a principle on the National Security Council that advises the president, will have already had the opportunity to see what that footage offers, as well as whatever footage came through the diplomatic channels and the various communications that were going through the Situation Room. The question of whether it goes to the Hill, I served at a time in government where there were some pretty ferocious lawyers that didn't seem to believe the executive branch should share anything with the other independent branch of government. We had a few tussles in the early part of the last decade over that. I'll let the lawyers duel it out, but I think in principle the public is owed an explanation. I think that the people with oversight are owed access to the information. I just think that Congress has sort of laid down before the election, and this won't come forward until after November 6th.
Yeah, exactly. Because there are so many stories that are flying around. Newsweek, and this is something that I've heard from multiple outlets, they're asking the question whether or not this consulate attack was an inside job, because only insiders would have been able to give up Chris Stevens' location in the safe house to the terrorists. He was there apparently for the opening of some school, and his whereabouts weren't supposed to be known. And then there's the story of that somehow he is tied to arms shipments or associated with arms shipments somehow that were going from Libyan rebels to rebels in Syria, and that maybe this was a cover-up. I don't know how much stock I want to put into any of this, but the longer that the administration goes on not providing any answers, I don't know. I mean, it sounds within reasonable doubt.
Well, unfortunately, the administration has fried any sense of credibility they could have in giving a clear narrative at this point. And so, absent that, it is very fertile ground for a lot of different theories to seem more plausible than they otherwise would be. I can't know, we can't know what was going on in terms of arms in and out of Libya at the time. My strong suspicion, with no evidence to back it up, though, is the way they found where Ambassador Stevens' location had to do with the appointment he had earlier in the day. My guess is that the location of that other ambassador was not kept as securely as Ambassador Stevens' whereabouts were, and there's a lot of ties between Libya and Turkey. In fact, Turkey holding some of the suspects from earlier attacks in their custody. My guess is that was one of the windows that led them to Ambassador Stevens.
Well, this story it's heartbreaking, especially when I hear Charlie Woods talk about his son and ask why wasn't my son protected, especially when the CIA annex had sent 3 urgent requests requiring military backup and they weren't answered. And then there was the reports of a gunship that was nearby that was out there in the Mediterranean. Could have done something. I mean, something could have been done. At least we know that much, correct?
Absolutely true. And it is unconscionable that you would be willing to thump your chest to take the risk to depose Muammar Gaddafi, but not be willing to take the risk to send people in to save our own. I think that our troops and other agents that were in that area were ready to go in. The guys that were on the ground that sacrificed their lives proved that principle. Someone higher up gave the stand-down order, and ultimately they should be held to account.
Absolutely. Oh, this is such a sad story. Stephen Yates, DC International Advisory, DCIadvisory.org. Stephen, it's always a pleasure to have your expertise with us every week. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
All right, take care.